A New York City point guard will give up his girl and his chain before he give up his dribble.
We revolutionized this game with our influence.
New York City playground basketball blew up on a global scale.
What we were seeing was cultural resilience.
It's New York City at its finest.
Reveille, donks.
Look at us now, tip to tip. This is our life. This is our passion. That's the spirit we bring to this show.
I'm Luke Thomas.
I'm Brian Campbell.
This is Morning Combat.
Danny Garcia has arrived at 154 pounds, and I've got all the results to talk about right now. Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. I am merely one half of the Morning Combat hosting duo. My partner, Brian Campbell, is on vacation, but I am here in Brooklyn. I am at the Barclays Center, and just behind me, Danny Garcia has defeated Jose Benavidez, Jr., albeit with some bizarre controversy that I truly cannot understand. So first things first, give me a thumbs up here on the video if you're watching on YouTube, of course, and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that when you do. You can see my socials there below. All right, let's get to the results first. I don't want to mar Danny Garcia's victory, but we have to get to it. So he wins via majority decision. Folks, let me explain something to you very clearly. This was no majority decision or split decision. This was about as close to one-way traffic as you're going to get for a fight that goes the full 12 rounds. You could give one, maybe 2 rounds to Benavidez. Probably round 9 was his best round, maybe round 4. And he did land some decent work in some other places. This was about what was Danny Garcia going to look like in his third weight class, this one being 154 pounds or super welterweight. And the answer is, by and large, pretty good, right? We knew he had some decent pop at 140. He had good pop at 147. It's not so clear based on the opponent whether or not his power carries at 154 pounds. But here's what we did see. We did see a guy who was able to work his jab. In fact, on our Morning Combat podcast, my co-host Brian Campbell, before the fight, spoke to Danny Garcia. And Garcia told him explicitly one of the things he really wanted to do in this contest was make the jab work for him. I would say in large part, he succeeded. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the CompuBox numbers in front of me. They did have some numbers on the screen for the Showtime broadcast. You can take a look at those. I typically like to go back and see where they are round by round with CompuBox. Again, I don't have them in front of me, so please check those out when you get a chance. But the story is from a general perspective. You had Jose Benavidez Jr., who was clearly taller, obviously, than Danny Garcia, but was very flat-footed, something we had kind of seen in his last contest against Francisco Torres, and that was up another weight class and then some. Both of those guys coming in the 157 or 154 mark, so they're almost closer to middleweight, really. But the reality is here back at 154 pounds, he was still very flat-footed, covering up. And in fact, as the fight went on, you saw him leaning back a little bit, which only got him into a lot more trouble. So what did we see from Garcia? Tons of great jabs, in fact, doubling, tripling it. His hand speed looked good. He would bring the guard up of Benavidez and then hit to the body in multiple combinations, right? Really letting the hands go, putting the speed of his athletic ability to good use, right? And you could see it, too. He would rile the crowd up. In fact, I would say of all the 6 fighters on the main card, he got by far the biggest pop, which is not necessarily all that surprising, but it is worth mentioning this was really about him and what he was going to look like in this weight class. So, okay, there was a couple of rounds in the middle, and including round 9, I would say he was a little bit flat-footed. But in general, what you saw from Garcia was he would flash the jab, transfer the defense of Benavidez, roast to the body. Sometimes he would split the guard down the middle with a 1-2 or come with high hooks. By the way, never just throwing 1, throwing 1-2, 1-2, right? Putting 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 punches together in combination. And it would just force Benavidez, who just looked like he was in quicksand and couldn't move, to just cover up and hold. Now, there were a couple times he was able to make Garcia miss and throw, but really the guy who was doing the best work either with the jab or if Benavidez was trying to corner him, you could see Garcia roll, he could slip, he could catch and shoot. He was really doing everything. It's not really clear how badly he was hurting Benavidez. And to be clear, the reason why I want to say Danny Garcia looked pretty good and not great is not that Garcia looked bad. Far from it. I don't want anyone to take home from this that Garcia looked mediocre or was fine or whatever. He looked pretty good. The only issue in terms of judging where Garcia could go from here is just that Benavidez looked like a planted tree. He wasn't moving hardly at all. He was trying to cut off the ring, but even that is not just a function of forward pressure or standing tall. There's a lot of extra footwork that goes into it, and he couldn't really do it. Again, at times, leaning back like he was in the Torres fight and then paying for it. By the 12th round, Garcia was like visibly motioning to the crowd to get them all excited and to see what he was doing and to cheer him on. And they listened. They responded all of the times. He was able to split the defense and the guard of Benavidez. The crowd popped every single time. So we're trying to make an assessment of how Garcia looked at 154 pounds. Based on the opponent, you, I think, can say we don't know much about the power. There wasn't a clear sign that he could transfer what he had at 140 up here. You know, this is not the same kind of situation where he's fighting Lucas Matisse in 2012 or 2013, whatever it was. It's not really that. But you can say that the hand speed looked good. That's the most motioning I think I've seen Garcia do in a long time, where he would throw rapid combinations, roll under a hook, and then change angles, and then force Benavidez to follow. Even though he was on the back foot, it was Benavidez coming forward, but it was also Benavidez just getting hit more as he moved into him and moved into him and moved into him. It was constant in that way. So in that sense, I thought Garcia looked pretty good at 154 pounds. And in the post-fight speech, talking to Jim Gray, he broke down into tears. Clearly the time away and perhaps the uncertainty about his career had gotten to him. It wasn't like he was down in the dumps or anything like that. It wasn't like the loss to Errol Spence was some kind of terrible event in his career. But I do think he probably felt he just wanted to get right, it seemed like. He really wanted to get his hand raised again and feel good about his career again and feel good about his abilities again. And he did really well over the course of 12 rounds. As I mentioned, I think round 9 you could maybe give to Benavidez. Again, maybe round 4. One of the judges, and I cannot believe I am saying this, but one of the judges, so the scores were 117, 111, totally reasonable, 116, 112, a little close for my tastes, but okay, right guy wins. One of the judges, I mean, this is comical. They had it at 114, 114. I don't even know what to say about that. That is so out to lunch. It's bizarre. So that might even be worse. That's like, you know, not the same stakes or the same scale or the same kind of stage as Canelo versus Mayweather and C.J. Ross's terrible scorecard in that fight. But it's reminiscent of that. It's reminiscent of that where you're like, I'm sorry, what did you score this? Okay, I'm sorry, who? You just can't believe that they could come to a decision where both guys were roughly even. Danny Garcia styled on Benavidez for long stretches of this fight. What did Benavidez really have to offer? Some counterpunching. I will say that for all of the volume that Garcia was throwing, I'll give Benavidez credit. He did a pretty good job of shelling up, covering up, keeping his guard high, trying to stay tucked underneath it to a reasonable degree. You know, there was a lot of things that Garcia threw that did not actually get through the guard. Fair enough. I'll give him that. And again, in round 9, when Garcia began to stop moving, for example, he had the ability to then find Garcia. But in general, he couldn't find him. In general, he couldn't really land. In general, he couldn't do much. A 114-114 scorecard is a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. That is plainly indefensible. Even if you want to say, well, the ringside position is different than the one on TV, and they might see things differently, I can certainly grant a little bit of latitude. That's why I think 116, 112, while a little strange, fine. I wouldn't really argue too much with it. The right guy wins. That's really where you want to go with it. 114, 114 is a stain, unfortunately, a little bit on Garcia's resume. He wasn't robbed since he was the winner, but he was robbed of a proper accounting of the effort that he put in Brooklyn tonight, his 9th time here at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. So the question now becomes, where does he go from here? His brother, David Benavidez, was interviewed on the broadcast by Jim Gray, and his argument was, after tonight, it's a championship fight. Not sure I agree. Well, I can understand why he might want that. Obviously, that would be a thing that, if Benavidez had won, you would put him in that position. But we're talking now about Garcia. Let's say the winner. Would the winner get a title shot here? It would have really had to have been a strong, really strong, I think maybe even a finish for Garcia for that to really be in play, and we didn't get that. And again, Garcia looked really good. Good movement, good bounce, good hand speed, good combinations, consistent, by and large, consistent effort, stayed out of trouble, barely had a mark on him in the 12th. But here's where I come down on this. Should he get a title shot? Well, the problem is the belts, in terms of what is a problem for Danny Garcia, the belts are not spread out. It's not like you can go one way or this way. Jermell Charlo has them all. All roads lead to him. Did you necessarily see something in this performance, as good as it was, that leads you to believe that, not that that fight couldn't be big, it probably could be, but that's the appropriate next step? I just don't think it was enough of a fact-finding mission to affirmatively conclude that. That's where I come down. I would like to see him fight another contender. Somebody well above what Benavidez could turn in tonight. A Tony Harrison, a Sebastian Fundora, a Brian Castano, an Erickson Lubin, any of those to me would work well. It would tell us a little bit more. It would give us a little bit more insight into what exactly Danny Garcia has at 154 pounds. This was definitely a triumphant return to Brooklyn. This was definitely a good first start, I think, at 154 pounds. And listen, this is something that we had Raul Marquez and Boots Ennis and Cool Boy Steph on the pre-fight show where we were covering the prelims. Together we were talking about the fights, but we never got to this part, which is Danny Garcia is probably knocking on the door at a bare minimum of Hall of Fame entry. Maybe some people might have him in. I think a lot of people might have him on that bubble. If he gets a third title in a third weight class, that might be that shoe-in moment that he really needs. That might be that thing that can push him over the line. So a good first start for sure, a nice performance. A terrible judging scorecard with 114. Truly, I can't say this enough. Absolutely atrocious that scorecard is. But that wasn't the only fight on the card. I would like to see just to wrap things up, I would like to see what happens with Danny Garcia. I do think there should be a contender. I don't think the Charlo fight makes the most sense next, which isn't to say you may not see it, but it's not exactly what I think the doctor ordered right away if you really want a full accounting of Danny Garcia at 154 pounds. Nevertheless, he does have a bit of a name. Jermell Charlo's in need of a fresh contender. It might actually work. Also on the card here, very quickly, Adam Kovnatchki and Amir Demirazin. These two guys landed consistently, two heavyweights, consistently on each other, and Kovnatchki having the Polish crowd here behind him cheering him on the whole time, over and over again. The big difference seemed to be that while Demirazin didn't have much of a jab, Kovnatchki had a lot of body work, but Demirazin was able to land a lot of straight punches on Kovnatchki, a lot of uppercut straights, a lot of uppercut hooks over and over and over again, popping his head back. And the crowd didn't like the result, but I think it's the fair one for what they call the Iceman, the Turkish Olympian in this particular case. I thought he just was a little bit more consistent walking down Kovnatchki. Kovnatchki would have bursts of inspiration. Hard to say it was enough to get the scorecard that he needed, which, by the way, brings him to now 3 losses in a row, 2 to Robert Helenius, and then now this one, which is not great. It wasn't like he looked bad or that he was completely out of the fight. Not exactly that. But for all the punches he landed, this would go both ways. Both guys were able to land a lot, but then not really do a whole lot with it necessarily. They could, reasonably win the round, but they couldn't actually put the other guy in danger or peril. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. So it's a nice win for Demirazin. It's a nice breakout performance on Showtime. It's unfortunate for the hometown crowd that Kovnatchki couldn't get it done, but they basically stood in front of each other and traded for the duration of that contest. So keep that in mind. To open the card, we also had some controversy. Rancis Barthelemy taking on a guy out of my neck of the woods, Gary Antoine Russell. Now, Russell came out like a bat out of hell in the first couple of rounds, And Barthelemy doing pretty good at finding some openings as the aggression kind of got the best of him a little bit. But as the fight slowed down, you begin to see Gary Russell Jr. being a little bit more physical, but being a little bit more patient, being a little bit more thoughtful about his offense, being a little bit more direct about it. And so as a consequence, he was able then to land a huge shot in the 6th round. It actually dropped Barthelemy really bad to the point where he fell like face and shoulder first to the canvas. Here's the controversy. He stands up, walks to the neutral corner. By the way, obviously by himself, under no assistance, turns and faces the ref. The ref asks him to walk to him, which he does, and then the ref grabs his arms to see what kind of response he was going to get. Whatever he saw, he didn't like, and he waved it. I didn't like that call. I thought it was a great shot from Gary Antoine Russell. I thought he was doing really well. It was a phenomenal job by him, starting off a little bit too hot maybe, then dialing it back, being a little bit more scientific about it. He did well. But you didn't get to see Barthelemy, what he could do in that perilous moment. Russell gets the win, which is fine because he was doing really well, and that was a huge shot. But it wasn't the kind that should have altered it. It's the kind that should have turned that fight into its next chapter. That the referee just, in the Rolly Romero fight and the Tank fight, which, by the way, was in this arena as well, when you watch the referee instruct Romero to walk to him, he's really unstable. Barthelemy was hurt, but he wasn't unstable in that way. Didn't love that call. Didn't love that call, necessarily. Can't say the wrong guy won, but, what would the fight have looked like had it kept going? Who knows? All I can say is Gary Antoine Russell getting a nice win at super lightweight. Great win for Demirzin, certainly at heavyweight. And Danny Garcia at 154, showing lots of promise. But did we get the full Monty? Did we get the full understanding of exactly what he has to offer at this weight class? Probably not. Probably not. Let's see him against another contender, and let's see what he looks like from there. That is my short recap for you folks here tonight from the Barclays Center here in Brooklyn, New York. I appreciate you guys tuning in. One more time, my name is Luke Thomas. I host Morning Combat with Brian Campbell, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, live, 11 a.m. in the East. We talk boxing. We talk MMA. We talk combat sports. And that's it. We're done. Long fight week. It's over. Congrats to all the winners. I'm out of here. Until next time, enjoy the fights.
Will give up his girl and his chain before he give up his dribble.
We revolutionized this game with our influence.
New York City playground basketball blew up on a global scale.
What we were seeing was cultural resilience.
It's New York City at its finest.